The night of January 31st, Nancy Guthrie did what she had done countless times before. A decision made in advance, by someone who knew enough about Nancy Guthrie, about her home, about her routines, to commission what happened to her. But the question itself does not disappear just because it remains unanswered. If anything, it is the question that makes everything else make sense. Now, here is what the investigation uncovered about who had been near that house before, and why the FBI's interest in one particular connection may be the most telling detail this case has produced. According to Fox Digital and 2 law enforcement sources, that second figure on camera, the one without the gun, without the backpack, was reportedly recorded on January 11th, nearly 3 weeks before Nancy went missing. 3 weeks before, someone was at or near that house on January 11th, and then something happened on February 1st. What does it mean that the same figure, or a figure matching that description, appears in footage from both dates? Sheriff Nanos disputed the 2-date interpretation. He did not, however, provide an alternative explanation that has been verified independently. What multiple sources have confirmed is this: the FBI asked neighbors for their security footage. The FBI isn't looking for a drifter. They're looking for the person who made the call. They went door to door. They asked specifically about January 11th. They wanted to know what cameras had captured, and when. Former CIA and FBI agent Tracy Walder returned to the same point she had raised earlier. You do not scout a house like this unless you have a reason to be there. You do not appear on camera 3 weeks before a disappearance by coincidence. The neighbor Laura told investigators she believes there were at least 2 people involved the night Nancy disappeared. The DNA recovered inside the house is described by investigators as mixed, meaning it may contain material from more than one individual. The FBI's own lab, working with resources from Arizona State University, has confirmed the complexity of separating those samples. Mixed DNA, at least 2 people, according to a neighbor. A figure on camera weeks before the event, and the person inside that house who made the call possible. A camera removed by hand in the early hours of the morning. What does it tell you when a crime this specific, this prepared, targets an 4-year-old woman who cannot walk 50 yards on her own? It tells you this was not about Nancy. It was about what Nancy represented. Her home, her routines, the people connected to her, and someone, somewhere in that circle, knew enough to make a phone call or send a message, or give someone a reason to show up at that iron gate 3 weeks before she disappeared. The FBI is not calling it random. Multiple former agents who have reviewed this case publicly have refused to call it opportunistic. And the investigators who are closest to what the evidence actually shows have described this case, in the weeks since Nancy vanished, as, in the words of former FBI agent Jennifer Coffundafer, red hot. What does that mean? What has the investigation actually uncovered since the morning police found blood on that front porch? Nancy is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. And who, specifically, is the FBI now looking at? That is what the evidence reveals next. Keep watching. There are ransom notes in this case, more than one, and they were sent not to Nancy Guthrie's family, not to the people who loved her, not to the people who might actually pay, but to newsrooms. Local outlets received them first, then national media. TMZ eventually published reporting on their existence. The notes included a Bitcoin address. They came with deadlines. And both of those deadlines passed without any response from whoever sent them, without any follow-through, without any of the pressure a genuine ransom demand requires to function. Think about that sequence carefully. A kidnapper who wants money contacts the family. According to Sheriff Chris Nanos, she cannot walk 50 yards on her own. That is how it works. That is the logic of the crime. You take someone, you tell the people who love them what it will cost to get them back, and you wait. You do not send demands to journalists. You do not structure a financial negotiation around a cryptocurrency address buried in a press release. That is not how ransom works. That is how spectacle works. Former NYPD Sergeant Joe Giacalone, who has spent years analyzing cases like this one, said publicly that he never believed the ransom narrative from the beginning, not from day one. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Gagliano went further on CNN, pointing out that the statistical rate of kidnapping for ransom involving a victim over 80 years old is, in his words, nearly zero. He raised the possibility of what investigators call virtual kidnapping, a scheme that uses fabricated evidence and AI-generated material to simulate an abduction that never actually occurred, She depends on heart medication every day. She wears a hearing aid, extracting payment from terrified families before anyone realizes the premise was false. To be clear, no one has confirmed which of these scenarios applies to Nancy Guthrie's case. The FBI is still investigating. But the fact that former senior agents are raising these questions publicly on national television is not nothing. It tells you that the people who have spent careers inside these investigations are looking at the available evidence and finding the kidnapping framework difficult to sustain. Former FBI Deputy Director Chris Swecker, speaking with Fox News, said plainly that he questions whether this is actually a kidnapping at all. Veteran homicide investigator Paul Celino told the New York Post something more pointed. He does not believe Nancy was abducted, and he added, with the precision of someone who has worked these cases for decades, that there must be evidence the investigation is sitting on. Evidence that points somewhere specific. Meanwhile, the person responsible for this investigation has his own significant problems. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos is currently facing a formal recall effort. By every measure, she is a woman who requires care, who lives carefully, who does not disappear. It was initiated on day 46 of this investigation by Republican congressional candidate Daniel Boutier, who needs 120,000 signatures in 120 days to force a removal election. That effort did not emerge from nowhere. Before he became sheriff, Nanos served with the El Paso Police Department from 1976 to 1982, during which time his internal affairs file documented 26 separate complaints and a total of 37 days of suspension. He has been accused of misrepresenting his work history on his resume. There is currently a civil lawsuit against him seeking $1.3 million. And according to former Pima County SWAT commander Bob Kreider, 98% of the sheriff's department's own personnel voted no confidence in Nanos as their leader. 98%. The man standing at the podium, telling the public that the investigation is progressing, that intelligence is accumulating, that everything is moving forward, is a man whose own department, in numbers that approach unanimity, has said they do not trust him. And yet, at 1:47 inches the morning, the Ring camera at the front of her house went offline. And on day 45 of the investigation, a source speaking to journalist Megyn Kelly said that as of that moment, investigators had no suspect, no direction, and nothing strong enough to support a search warrant application. Nanos disputed this framing in early March, telling reporters that the investigation had, in his words, certainly progressed more than it did in the beginning, and that there had been significant intelligence accumulation. That statement came from Nanos himself, and has not been independently verified. His characterization of progress and Kelly's source's characterization of stagnation sit in direct contradiction, and neither has been resolved. If you were designing a case to be difficult to solve, you might start here. A victim who cannot advocate for herself, a lead investigator with no institutional credibility, a ransom framework that multiple former federal agents find implausible, and a pool of evidence that is real but not yet sufficient to compel a single arrest. Not because of a power outage, not because of a technical glitch. Someone physically removed it from its mount. The weight of that is not dramatic. It is simply heavy. And it has been sitting on this case since February 1st. This is the kind of investigation that deserves the attention of people who understand what they're looking at. If you've been following this story and you think others should know what's actually in the evidence record, share this video. Here's what the investigation actually knows. FBI agents returned to Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood on day 45. They did not come alone, and they did not come without a specific focus. They went to neighbors. They asked about a construction crew. A house nearby had been undergoing work, and according to a neighbor who spoke directly with Brian Enton's reporting team, the FBI requested the full list of contractors and workers connected to that site. Every name. Everyone who had been in proximity to that street during the relevant period. 41 minutes later, at 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her iPhone. They also asked about something else. Someone had moved out of the neighborhood before Nancy disappeared, not after. Before. The FBI wanted to know about that person, about that departure, about whatever connection might exist between someone who had recently left and what happened on the night of February 1st. No name has been released. No connection has been confirmed. But the FBI asked, and the FBI does not ask questions it has no reason to ask. This is what convergence looks like from the outside. Not an arrest, not a press conference. A federal agency, more than 6 weeks into an investigation, going back to the same street, asking about the same radius of people, closing the circle one conversation at a time. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffundafer had already drawn a line in the sand on day 41, speaking publicly on social media and to national television outlets, including Newsweek. She announced that the search phase of this investigation was over. She had dinner at her daughter's house. She played cards with her family. 41 minutes. That gap has no official explanation. Not winding down. Over. She called the case red hot. That phrase matters. Search phase ending means investigators are no longer operating under the assumption that Nancy Guthrie will be found by looking. It means the evidentiary focus has shifted from location to identity. From where is she to who did this and who paid for it. Coffundafer has followed this case from the beginning. She does not use language loosely. When a former federal agent with her background says a case is red hot and the search phase is finished, she is describing an investigation that has a direction, not a conclusion, a direction. On day 46, Annie Guthrie's car was returned to her. It had been held as evidence for 46 days. The specific reason it was retained has never been made public. Law enforcement has not said publicly what happened inside that house between the moment the camera. Its return suggests, though does not confirm, that whatever forensic question it was meant to answer has been addressed, and that the investigative branch it represented has been resolved. It does not tell us what that branch found. But when evidence is returned, it usually means investigators are done with it, not that it yielded nothing. Dominic Aaron Evans has not been named as a suspect. That statement must be made clearly and completely. He is not a named suspect. He has not been charged. He has not been accused in any official proceeding. What is publicly documented is this. He is a 8-year-old elementary school teacher in Tucson who co-founded a band called Early Black with Tommaso Cioni in 2007. Went dark, and the moment the device keeping her heart in rhythm lost contact with the outside world. The two have been musical collaborators for nearly 2 decades. Evans met with FBI agents and Pima County investigators for approximately 40 minutes. He told them he was home with his family on the night Nancy disappeared. Public court records from Pima County, cited by the investigative outlet JLR Investigates, document a prior criminal history that includes felony, burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, and DUI convictions. Those records are public. The connection to Tommaso Cioni is established. The FBI meeting happened. None of that makes him responsible for what happened to Nancy Guthrie. What it means is that investigators have spoken with someone who has a documented history with crimes involving entry into others' property, who has a direct personal relationship with the last person known to have seen Nancy safely home, and who was asked to account for his whereabouts on the night in question. But the sequence itself tells you something. Whoever was there knew which camera to take down. They knew when to move. The FBI is not done. No arrest has been made. No charges have been filed. The DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home remains a mixed sample, and the laboratory process of separating individual profiles from that mixture is, by the accounts of forensic analysts, genuinely complicated. Results have not been publicly confirmed. What the investigation has is this: a direction, a set of relationships it is examining, a forensic sample it is working to interpret, and a neighborhood it has returned to more than once. What it does not yet have, at least not publicly, is a name attached to a warrant. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. There is something specific this case can teach you that most coverage never gets to. Start with the Ring camera. It was removed from its mount manually at 1:47 inches the morning. Not hacked, not jammed, taken down by hand. Most people who install home security cameras think about the digital threat, the password breach, the remote access vulnerability, and they had enough time, in those 41 minutes, to do whatever they came to do. This case is a reminder that the physical threat is just as real. A camera mounted at reachable height, without a secondary recording backup or a cellular failover, goes dark the moment someone decides to take it off the wall. If you have cameras on your property, the question worth asking is not just whether they're connected, but whether the footage is being written to a location that survives the camera being removed. The pacemaker data in this case is something else entirely. No one installed it as a security measure. Nancy Guthrie had it because her heart required it. But when it stopped syncing at 2:28 inches the morning, it became an unintentional timestamp, a piece of medical infrastructure that recorded the moment something went wrong with a precision no witness could have provided. By morning, Nancy's family couldn't reach her. She missed an appointment she had been expected at. This is an emerging reality of modern forensic investigation. Devices we carry for health reasons, fitness trackers, medical monitors, continuous glucose sensors, generate data that can place people in time and space with clinical precision. Investigators are increasingly aware of this. It is worth knowing that the technology you carry for one purpose may, in certain circumstances, serve as the most reliable record of what happened to you. Now consider what this case illustrates about the structure of hired crime investigations and why they take longer than people expect. When someone commits a crime directly, the evidentiary chain runs from perpetrator to victim in a relatively straight line. Motive, means, opportunity, and physical evidence often cluster around the same person. But when a crime is allegedly commissioned, the chain has a break in the middle. The person who planned it and the person who carried it out may have no visible direct relationship to the victim. When police arrived at the house, they found blood on the front porch. The physical evidence points to one person. The financial or communicative evidence points to another. And connecting those two nodes requires a different kind of investigative work. Subpoenas, financial records, communication metadata, and digital forensics that cannot be rushed by public impatience. What this case teaches us about hired crime investigations is that the arrest, when it comes, often comes long after investigators know. The gap between knowing and proving is where these cases live. The FBI described this investigation as red hot at day 41. That does not mean an arrest is imminent. It means the picture is becoming clear in ways that are not yet ready for a courtroom. That distinction matters. Not just for understanding this case, but for understanding how the legal system is designed to function. Evidence that satisfies a detective is not the same as evidence that survives a trial. Forensic testing confirmed it was Nancy's. Her evening medication was still on the kitchen counter, untouched. The standard is higher than certainty. It is provability. And building that takes time that feels, from the outside, like nothing is happening. Something is happening. It is just happening at the pace that evidence, not urgency, dictates. Nancy Guthrie went home on the night of January 31st. The garage door closed behind her at 9:50 inches the evening. Her family played cards with her just hours before. Her medication was on the counter, waiting for a morning she did not reach. The FBI says someone was hired. Former federal agents who have reviewed this case publicly say it was planned, not opportunistic. The evidence record, the disabled camera, the 4-1-minute gap, the pacemaker timestamp, the figure on footage from weeks before, the mixed DNA, the iron gate, the ransom notes sent to journalists instead of family. All of it points toward the same conclusion. This was not random. Her hearing aid was still inside the house. Nancy Guthrie was gone. And the person who set it in motion knew Nancy's world from the inside. Who made that call? That question does not yet have a public answer. But the investigation is not standing still. The FBI has been back to that neighborhood. They have names they are examining. They have forensic material they are working through. And they have described this case, in the plainest terms, available to former agents who follow it closely, as one that is moving. Nancy deserves an answer. Her family deserves an answer. And the people in that neighborhood who have spoken to federal agents, who have handed over footage, who have answered questions 3 and 4 times, deserve to know that what they gave mattered. This channel will cover every significant development in this case as it happens. If you want to be there when the next piece of this falls into place, subscribe now so you don't miss it. This video is going to walk through what investigators have found, what they're still looking for. Like this video if you think the evidence record deserves more attention than it's getting. And if someone you know has been following this story, send it to them. The more people who understand what is actually in this case, the harder it becomes to let it go quiet. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. That is where this investigation stands today. The next video will be there when that changes. And sometime around 9:48 inches the evening, her son-in-law drove her home to the house she had lived in for more than 50 years. And the one detail that changes everything about how this case is being investigated. Because there is a person connected to this world who, according to multiple sources, was seen at or near this house before Nancy disappeared. And the question of who hired them and who gave them access is what the FBI is now trying to answer. Stay with this. Nancy Guthrie had lived in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona for more than half a century. Not a temporary address, not a retirement move, This was home, the kind of home measured in decades rather than years. The kind of place where neighbors know your name, where the routes in and out of your daily life are as familiar to the people around you as they are to you. She was 84. She had a pacemaker regulating her heart. She relied on medication she took every evening. She wore a hearing aid. These are not incidental details. The garage door opened. She went inside. The garage door closed. They are the architecture of a life that required structure, that required presence, that required someone to notice when things went wrong. Her daughter Savannah is the co-host of NBC's Today Show. When Nancy disappeared, that name carried the story into national headlines almost immediately. But before the cameras arrived, before the press conferences, before the FBI field office got involved, there was simply a family that couldn't reach their mother on a Sunday morning. The night before, January 31st, Nancy had been at the home of her daughter Annie and Annie's husband, Tommaso Cioni. Dinner, cards, a family evening, ordinary and warm. Tommaso drove her home afterward. He watched the garage door open and close behind her. He left. What Tommaso could not have known, what none of them could have known, is that someone else was also paying attention to that house. Former CIA and FBI agent Tracy Walder put it plainly when she was asked about this case. That was the last confirmed moment Nancy Guthrie was safe. This, she said, was not a house you walk past and decide to rob on impulse. The Catalina Foothills neighborhood is not the kind of place where strangers wander. Nancy's home has an iron security gate at the front entrance. It is a house with layers, with barriers, with the kind of physical boundaries that require specific knowledge to navigate. Specific knowledge. That phrase will matter. Because the question this case keeps returning to is not whether something terrible happened to Nancy Guthrie. The evidence left on that front porch answers that. The question is how someone knew enough to plan it, how they knew the layout, how they knew which cameras to disable, how they knew when she would be home and when she would be alone. Someone gave them that information, or someone with that information was, themselves, involved. What happened next was not random. It was not opportunistic. Walk the timeline slowly, because the details only become visible when you slow down enough to see them. January 31st, 9:48 p.m. A camera at the garage records the door opening. Tommaso Cioni pulls up. Nancy gets out. The door comes down 2 minutes later, at 9:50. Confirmed. Verified. The last moment on record where Nancy Guthrie was unquestionably safe. 4 hours pass. The house is dark. The neighborhood is quiet. 1:47 a.m. The Ring camera at the front of the house goes offline. Not a power failure, not a software issue. The device was physically removed from its mount. That is a deliberate act. It requires someone to approach the front of the house, reach up, and take the camera down with their hands. It is not something that happens by accident. And according to the FBI, it was not the work of a stranger who happened to walk past the right house on the wrong night. It is not something that happens unless you know it needs to happen. 41 minutes pass. 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker loses its sync connection with her iPhone. That sync is not a luxury feature. It is how the device communicates that it is functioning, that the heart it monitors is still in rhythm, that the woman wearing it is still there. When it goes silent, something has changed. Something that, 41 minutes earlier, someone made sure no camera would record. Sunday morning. The family calls, no answer. The appointment comes and goes. Police arrive. On the front porch, there is blood. Forensic analysis confirms it belongs to Nancy Guthrie. Inside the house, on the kitchen counter, her evening medication sits exactly where she left it, untouched. Her hearing aid is still in the house. Someone was hired. Think about what that means for a moment. Whatever happened to Nancy, it happened before she took her medication, before she settled in for the night, before she was done with January 31st. The camera footage that does exist captures something else. In one image, a figure approaches the house. They are carrying a gun. They have a backpack. The timestamp places this near the time of Nancy's disappearance. Confirmed, published, seen by investigators. In another image, a figure is visible without a gun, without a backpack. And according to multiple sources, including a Fox Digital report citing 2 law enforcement sources, that second image was captured on a different day entirely, weeks before Nancy disappeared. The Pima County Sheriff's Office disputed this characterization. Sheriff Nanos pushed back on that timeline. But the reporting from Fox Digital stands unretracted, attributed to sources inside the investigation. Not a break-in gone wrong, not a robbery that escalated, a transaction. There is also this. The figure in the camera footage was captured with a flashlight held in their mouth. An analyst from Arizona State University reviewed the footage and identified this as a potentially significant forensic detail, noting that such a device could potentially yield DNA. Whether that analysis has produced results has not been publicly confirmed. One neighbor, a woman identified only as Laura, told investigators she believes there were at least 2 people involved. She confirmed that FBI agents had come to her door multiple times, including the Friday before the story broke publicly. She also mentioned something that quietly reframes everything else. Nancy's home has an iron security gate at the front entrance. If that gate was locked the night Nancy disappeared, no one from outside could have entered through the front. Not without a key, not without access, not without someone on the other side who knew how to let them in. That question, whether the gate was locked, has not been answered publicly. Law enforcement has not confirmed it.